Legend, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
It's an honor to have you here. We met several months ago at Scott Mann's play here in Franklin, and I've kind of kept in touch ever since. And we've been wanting to get you on to talk about the withdrawal, the money that's going to the Taliban. I think there are very few people around that have a more in-depth insight than you do. And so this is going to be a heavy episode, but I just want to say that I really appreciate you coming. And I know this is going to be very eye-opening to a lot of Americans and probably the world. Before we get any farther into the interview, Legend, I just wanted to explain to the audience why the camera shots are different. Your true name and face can never be revealed, at least not right now, due to the fact that you still travel over to Afghanistan and fight and are a member of the NRF, which is the Afghan National Resistance Front fighting force. Just wanted to make that clear. Now we can carry on.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
It's my pleasure.
I never thought that 23 years after 9/11, I would have to come here to the Sean Ryan show to tell the world that the Taliban is a terrorist group. And yet I'm here. And we're doing just that.
It's a real shame, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
But let me give you an introduction real quick. So you were born in war in Afghanistan. You immigrated to the United States before 9/11. You joined the US Army as a linguist and in the intelligence community as an analyst. You deployed to Afghanistan to Khost, Bagram, and Kabul. Returned to the US to train Afghan forces pre-deployment. You returned to Afghanistan with the Department of Defense, and now you are part of the NRF, the Afghan National Resistance Front. And you're here to get us up to speed on the U.S. Taliban relations. And I think that's the primary goal of this. And as much as I can't wait to dive in, I'm very concerned about what I'm going to hear, and I think the rest of the world will be too.
I think you'll be surprised.
But before we get too serious, everybody gets a gift. Everybody gets a gift. So.
Wow, ranch.
Little ranch dressing for you. So, after our dinner last night, you said when you came to America, you had a ranch addiction and it went on everything. And there's also some gummy bears in there for you.
I am still addicted to ranch.
Well, maybe you can dump them on those gummy bears.
Well, today you also get a gift, Sean.
Oh, nice. I love gifts. Oh, boy.
I should have warned you. It may make you sad.
What is this?
This is a flag that the Taliban burned in 2022. We recovered it from Afghanistan.
Oh, man.
This is when the Taliban were celebrating their first year anniversary in Kabul. This is what they were doing and chanting "Death to America" all over Kabul. And there's a few of these flags. So
you personally recovered this?
Yes, and I gave the first one to General Joseph Votel, former U.S. Central Command CO. The other one went to Colonel Mike Waltz, Congressman Mike Waltz from Florida.
Oh.
And then the third one went to Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann. And then you have the fourth one.
Well, thank you. That's, I don't know what to say. Thank you, but
absolutely,
it will be in the SRS museum in here. Thank you. Wow. Well, before we get too in the weeds about everything that's going on, I want to dig into a little bit of your background to kind of qualify you on why you're able to speak on this and how you become so informed. So, what kind of work were you doing for the U.S. Army in the global war on terrorism?
So I joined the U.S. Army at the age of 17. And because I was born in Afghanistan, I was in a very unique position. Every general out there wanted an Afghan with him. And there were linguists, obviously, as contractors, civilians, but there weren't many Afghan Americans in the U.S. Army. So I knew the language, I knew the history of the country. I was born there, and I was an American soldier. I had a security clearance, and so I worked under the umbrella of the intelligence community. Unlike other U.S. Army soldiers who have one MOS, I had an MOS too, one, but they do one specific thing. Where I was deployed, one day I was with the division headquarters, the next day I was with the CID at the gate, the next day I was helping during an interrogation. I was everywhere. And so my job, like I said, fell under the US Army Intelligence. I did linguistics. I deployed to Afghanistan. After my deployment, I returned to the US. I was stationed here in Fort Riley, Kansas, and we had this pilot program where we would train Afghan soldiers who would come here for training and they would go back to Afghanistan. At the same time, we also had pre-deployment training for U.S. forces who were going to Afghanistan. So the U.S. government had started this pilot program. It was to give the U.S. soldiers a taste of Afghanistan before they go to Afghanistan. And we were there. We started this at Fort Riley. I played a very, very tiny role. We had role players in there, Afghan-American civilians who the government would hire and bring. And so there was a whole Afghan village inside America, inside this military base. There was a call to prayer. Everyone spoke Farsi or Pashto. There was a local villager, an elder, a mullah, a governor, and those Afghan soldiers who were here. And then the U.S. soldiers would partner with them and they would go on joint missions. Yes, we were involved in that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. How many times did you deploy to Afghanistan with the U.S. government, the U.S. Army?
2. One in 2007, and then an additional one with DOD in 2011.
And what kind of work were you doing over there?
So I think we covered the Army part. The other one, while I was in Afghanistan, I was still in the Army, just not active duty. I was on reserves.
What units were you attached to?
82nd was my first unit, then Fort Riley, the big red one,
Okay.
1st Infantry Division, yes. And then following that, I was on a special assignment in the West Coast that also fell under the intelligence community, is something that I cannot talk about.
Okay.
Yes, but it was that. And then following that, I went on my tour to Afghanistan again. And this was with the DOD under a contract. And it was basically similar to what the CIA did, what you did in Afghanistan, except I was not CIA.
Okay.
And we were civilians. We would do RFIs. We would get requests for information. We would go to villages, go to different places, and get that information. I had recruited, trained, and maintained this network inside Afghanistan, and we would collect information. We would gather information, not collect. It's all in the word. So CIA collects. We didn't collect. We gathered. And we would submit that. We would report to anyone that needed information, whether it be ISAF, NATO allies, U.S. Embassy, agency, anyone, U.S. Army Intelligence, CID, anyone that needed information, they would send us RFIs and we would go out. So the way it worked was, as you know, when there's a U.S. team that leaves the base in Afghanistan, goes on a mission, they have to have a certain amount of individuals, troops, vehicles, QRF has to be there, the roads have to be green. And so in my case, that wasn't the case. I had a freedom of movement letter from the commanding officer, which at that time was the Turkish military. And so I was out about in Kabul every day in a two-man team. It was me and my partner. We would go meet, collect the information, and come back.
Was your partner also an Afghan American?
No, he was an American. He was a U.S. Army Ranger, former, and then contractor. And then later on it switched, and then it was one of the Turkish allies.
Okay.
Yes, a former Turkish, I don't remember what their intelligence agency is called, but he was from the Turkish external agency, but now he had joined, he had joined this contract. He was there as a civilian.
So this was basically You don't have to answer this if you don't want, but this was with the Defense Intelligence Agency.
No. We were on a contract working for the DOD.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Not DIA.
Okay. So, but you were essentially a spy.
I wouldn't call it a spy. You're a spy.
I would. But, well, let's move on. I just wanted to dig in a little bit into your background because I wanted to qualify you to speak on this and give the audience a reason that they should be listening to you. And so I want to move on to August 2021, the Afghan Withdraw.
Yeah.
How were you involved in that?
So in August 2021, I still had family in Afghanistan. And I reached out to anyone I could to try to save their lives, but I didn't get any help, not from the State Department. And so I was reaching them, other veterans were reaching them, individuals very high ranking that I knew, that I reached out to for help. They reached out on my behalf, but I didn't really get any help. So when the last soldiers were pulled out of Afghanistan, August 31, I still had family there, so I had no choice but to go there myself, and I did. And once I landed there, these other veterans that I had just involved in the evacuations that I had been in touch with, they heard that I was there. And so they started reaching out to me. It's really funny. I remember while I was there, I spoke to a sitting U.S. senator that called me asking me for help. So he/she, I don't want to identify that individual, but it's a sitting U.S. senator, and he called me asking me to help this American citizen that was left behind. And I was shaking my head. I'm just a veteran. I'm not special forces. I'm not agency. They're there, and you're calling me to save an American. It's not my job. It would be my honor to do it, but why aren't you doing it? You're a United States senator. But that's how we got involved. There were so many Americans left behind, especially after the Abbey Gate bombing. There were reports that even U.S. passport holders were turned around from the HKIA. It was a mess. There are still Americans in Afghanistan right now. Yeah.
Do you know where?
All over Afghanistan.
How are they surviving?
And they're in hiding. So I'll give you an example. You could say there's a father, American citizen in Afghanistan, and his children are Afghan citizens. And his children under the age of 18 are eligible to come with him. But let's say he has a daughter that's 23. She's not eligible to come with him. And what kind of father would leave his daughter behind? The mercy of the Taliban. So now that father has decided to stay with his family, with his daughter. Okay? And now the State Department, the current administration is saying that father has chosen to stay in Afghanistan. The reality is you have made it impossible for him to come. He doesn't want to stay there. There are so many Americans in Afghanistan still to this day, man.
How many Americans do you estimate are still there?
I don't know the exact answer, but I'll tell you it's definitely not the 100 or so individuals Mr. Biden told everyone there were.
What would happen to those Americans if Taliban found them?
Dead, beheaded, executed, their families raped.
Do you think this has happened to any Americans yet?
It is happening to people in Afghanistan on a daily basis.
Here's the situation. You've got China, Russia, Ukraine, the border. The banks seem to be collapsing. Plus, the Chinese just negotiated with Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil to drop the US dollar. And most Americans, including myself, feel that we're in a recession right now. But despite all the evidence, I can't tell you what's going to happen for sure. Nobody can. Yet when it comes to your money, you should understand what's at stake. That's why I partnered with Goldco to possibly help at times like this. Go to SeanLikesGold.com or call 855-936-GOLD to get your free gold and silver kit. The kit shows you how to defend your money with precious metals and how listeners of the show could get up to $10,000 in bonus silver. Go to SeanLikesGold.com or call 855-936-GOLD to get your free gold and silver kit. I can't predict the future, but I can certainly prepare for it. So go to SeanLikesGold.com or call 855-936-GOLD now. Performance may vary. Consult with your tax attorney or financial professional before making an investment decision. As a SEAL, I learned that efficiency and speed come from deliberate actions. And when you want the best, you have to act quickly or something else will get it instead. It's like if you're hiring for your business, you want to find the most talented people for your open roles before the competition scoops them up, so you'd better be efficient and fast. That's where ZipRecruiter comes in. ZipRecruiter finds qualified candidates fast. And right now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/SRS. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology takes center stage to identify top talent for your roles. Immediately after you post your job, ZipRecruiter's smart technology starts showing you qualified people for it. Amp up your hiring performance with ZipRecruiter and find the best fast. See why 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Just go to this exclusive web address right now to try ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter.com/SRS. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/SRS. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
I want to tell you about this business venture I've been on for about the past 7-8 months, and it's finally come to fruition. I've been hell-bent on finding the cleanest functional mushroom supplement on the planet, and that all kind of stemmed from the psychedelic treatment I did. Came out of it, got a ton of benefits, haven't had a drop of alcohol in almost 2 years. I'm more in the moment with my family. And that led me down researching the benefits of just everyday functional mushrooms. And I started taking some supplements. I found some coffee replacements. I even repped a brand. And, you know, it got to the point where I just wanted the finest ingredients available, no matter where they come from. And it got to this point where I was just going to start my own brand. And so we started going to trade shows and looking for the finest ingredients. And in doing that, I ran into this guy, maybe you've heard of him. His name's Laird Hamilton and his wife, Gabby Reese. And they have an entire line of supplements with all the finest ingredients. And we got to talking. It turns out they have the perfect functional mushroom supplement. It's actually called Performance Mushrooms. And this has everything. It's USDA organic. It's got chaga, cordyceps, lion's mane, maitake. This stuff is amazing for energy balance, for cognition. Look, just being honest, see a lot of people taking care of their bodies. I do not see a lot of people taking care of their brain. This is the product, guys. And so we got to talking, and our values seemed very aligned. We're both into the functional mushrooms. And after a lot of back and forth, I am now a shareholder in the company. I have a small amount of ownership, and I'm just really proud to be repping and be a part of the company that's making the best functional mushroom supplement on the planet. You can get this stuff at lairdsuperfoods.com. You can use the promo code SRS. That'll get you 20% off these performance mushrooms or anything in the store. They got a ton of good stuff. Once again, that's lairdsuperfoods.com. Use the promo code SRS. That gets you 20% off. You guys are going to love this stuff. I guarantee it.
At what point during the withdrawal did you see the switch started to happen, where the U.S., unfortunately abandoned our allies. We had trained for 20 plus years together. At what point did you see the U.S. start to switch sides and back the Taliban versus our allied forces?
So there's a few things there. First, you have to be careful. When you say U.S., who do you mean? That's one. When U.S. backed the Taliban. Mm-hmm. It's not you. You are U.S. I'm American. I'm U.S. I did not do this. You did not do this. There are certain individuals that did this. It's not America. That's how the world sees it. We shouldn't. We know better. We're right here. Two, it didn't just happen all of a sudden in August 2021. This thing started during the DOHA deal. It started in 2020. In fact, even in July of 2021, months before the official evacuation, there were U.S. CIA officers were sending CIA and as well as U.S. military partners of the Afghan Air Force. They were sending messages to those pilots, Afghan pilots on the ground, in June and July, saying, in case of emergency, take your plane to Uzbekistan. This is in July, way before the evacuation. There were even cases where the U.S. was giving visas to the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. They were granting visas to commanders of forces such as Host Protection Force. They were evacuating the commanders and their families. So we know what a chain of command is, having both served in the military. Once you cut off that chain, you remove that commander at the peak of battle. What happens to that chain?
It deteriorates.
Yes, and that's exactly what happened. But all of this started in 2020 with the DOHA deal.
What is the DOHA deal?
A conspiracy, anything but a deal, anything but a good deal for the people in Afghanistan or for us in America, for both countries. It only benefited the Taliban. DOHA deal is a very complex issue. This is an agreement that was signed between Zalmay Khalilzad, the U.S. ambassador for Afghanistan, the U.S. special envoy for Afghanistan at that time, and the Taliban. They signed it in Doha. What happened was the Zalmay Khalilzad started pushing this idea with the help of the State Department that there are good Taliban and bad Taliban. President Trump at this point was the president while the Doha deal was signed. He wanted an end to war. He wanted U.S. service members to come home. He didn't want the U.S. soldiers to die. And he wanted this war to end. This is something I wanted. You wanted. Everyone in Afghanistan, they were tired of war. They wanted peace, but not this type of peace that they eventually got. This is not peace. They wanted to, from the Afghan side, they were looking at this Doha deal as a way to make the Taliban mainstream, bring them into politics, drop your weapons, stand in elections. What they got instead was the opposite. And so President Trump wanted an end to war. The Afghan government wanted an end to war. And so they said, let's give the Taliban a chance and let's negotiate with them. And so Zalmay Khalilzad, on behalf of the U.S., met with the Taliban in Doha, in Qatar. And they brought, the Taliban sent Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar to Doha. Mullah Ghani Baradar is the individual Sarah Adams, the CIA target, arrested. And so he was released because of the lobbying that Zalmay Khalilzad did. He was released from the prison and he was put in this mansion in Doha, and he negotiated on behalf of the Taliban. Now that guy is the brother-in-law of the founder of Taliban. He was the chief of operations for the Taliban for about 15 years in Afghanistan. So all of those US soldiers that died in battle, that man is directly responsible. But now he's there And Zalmay Khalilzad is saying this is a good Taliban, and he wants peace. And so
This is
signed
his
a deal.
son that we're negotiating with.
It's not a son, it's his brother-in-law. It's
His brother-in-law.
The founder of the Taliban is dead. He died many, many years ago in Pakistan. This man is his brother-in-law and the co-founder of the Taliban.
And that's who we're negotiating with.
That's who we're negotiating with in 2020. Not we, Zalmay Khalilzad is negotiating with him. And so if you have to know about Zalmay Khalilzad's history, his history. He's an Afghan American. He's an employee at the State Department, or was at that time. He was the special envoy for Afghanistan. But Zalmay Khalilzad's relationship with the Taliban goes back many, many years back. 1999, Zalmay Khalilzad was in Houston, Texas, and he invited the Taliban to the United States, to Houston, Texas, and the Taliban were here. Not just any Taliban, Amir Khan Muttaqi. Amir Khan Muttaqi today is the foreign minister of the Taliban, a senior Taliban cabinet official. And so Zalmay Khalilzad's relationship with the Taliban goes back all the way to 1999. I'll say it like this. If I tell your viewers to close their eyes right now and picture Taliban, right? And then I ask you what you saw, I know what you did not see. You did not see a guy in a suit and a tie, clean shaven, right here in the United States. But that is exactly where they are. That Zalmay Khalilzad individual, he's Taliban in mind, in action. He's been supporting the Taliban and lobbying for the Taliban since 1999. At a time when he knew back in 1999 that Taliban were executing women in stadiums, they were hosting Osama bin Laden. And all of those things that the Taliban were carrying out, Zalmay Khalilzad was aware of it. He didn't care. So now going forward, now that you know Zalmay Khalilzad, he worked for the State Department. He was tasked. So President Trump wanted peace. I'll go step by step. And he asked State Department for help, some Afghan expert. And he was given Zalmay Khalilzad. And so Zalmay Khalilzad goes to Doha and negotiates with the Taliban, and he comes up with this agreement. And there's 4 parts to that Doha deal. One is the U.S. will withdraw its forces from Afghanistan if the following happens. The Taliban do not host Al-Qaeda. The Taliban do not allow their supporters or give safe haven or any sort of support to Al-Qaeda. And that Taliban agreed that they will not allow Al-Qaeda to use Afghanistan's soil for attacks against America and America's allies. And then the Taliban must become mainstream. They must enter into negotiations like the Doha deal with the Afghan Republic, with the Constitutional Republic in Afghanistan. And then the Taliban agreed to a permanent ceasefire. And if all of these things happen, the U.S. will withdraw. President Trump will withdraw all of the U.S. forces. But only one of those things happened. The Taliban violated all of the others. They failed to negotiate with the Afghan government. They took over the Afghan government. They say they will not host Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is all over Afghanistan right now.
From what I understand, Al-Qaeda and Taliban are now one and the same. Is that true?
Absolutely. Al-Qaeda has just opened 8 new bases in Afghanistan. We can talk about Al-Qaeda if that's... Yes, we can talk about Al-Qaeda has 8 new bases in Afghanistan right now. This is according to UN Security Council, UN investigations. Al-Qaeda has 16,000 fighters in Afghanistan. And bin Laden's sons are in Kandahar and Helmand, protected by the Taliban. The Taliban are basically, they violated this agreement days after they signed it. I'll give you another example of the Doha deal and what the Taliban were doing back then. You know Mark Randall, U.S. Navy veteran who disappeared in Afghanistan? Mark Randall, so he's a U.S. Navy veteran. He's an American engineer who was in Afghanistan at around the time when the Doha deal was being negotiated between Zalmay Khalilzad and the Taliban leader. Mark Randall goes missing in Afghanistan. And people know Taliban and Haqqani are the ones doing all that kidnapping. They're taking American hostages. So people started asking Zalmay Khalilzad and the Taliban in Doha, well, what do you mean when you say you want peace and you want an end and you're kidnapping Americans? They said, no, we have not kidnapped this American. Zalmay Khalilzad said, anyone who says the Taliban did this, kidnapped Mark Randall, is an enemy of peace. They are saying this in order to break down this negotiation, these talks. And so people in Afghanistan and elsewhere, they kind of took a back step. They said, oh, no, I don't want to be labeled as an enemy of peace, so I'll just stay quiet. And then the Doha deal was signed, evacuations happened, we left. A few months ago in 2023, Mark Randall is released by the Taliban who did not hold him. But the Biden administration, so the Taliban did not release him just without getting anything in return. They asked for a specific individual who was in U.S. in jail, a Taliban commander, and the Biden administration released him. That Taliban commander is Haji Bashir Nurzai, Pablo Escobar of Afghanistan, drug kingpin. Mr. Biden released him in 2023.
Let's go, before we get into Al-Qaeda and Taliban, I want to go back to what was happening during the withdrawal. It seemed, I've interviewed a number of people on this subject, and it seemed that like the assassinations, all of the carnage that started happening over there, it seemed like a light switch. How fast did that start happening to the Afghan people? And who will start there?
Like I said earlier, it didn't just happen. To those in Afghanistan, they were watching this unfolding every day. And this could have been prevented. Unfortunately, at this point, Mr. Biden and his administration had won the elections, and he was in charge, and he refused to support them. The president of Afghanistan at that time, Ashraf Ghani, he sent a letter to Mr. Biden requesting a list of defensive weapons that the Afghan government needed in order for the security forces to defend the people and the country against the Taliban. Mr. Biden received it, and he said this is a wish list. He's not going to get it, knowing that the Taliban were advancing. The Zalmay Khalilzad's point, his objective was that the Taliban would circle eventually the Afghan presidential palace, forcing Ashraf Ghani into signing an agreement, handing over power to the Taliban. Now, Ashraf Ghani, he wasn't a good president. He had bad policies. But nevertheless, he was elected by the Afghan population. It was a democratic elected government. Now think about this. Had Ashraf Ghani chosen to stay instead of fleeing, right, he would have handed over this government to the Taliban, and today the Taliban would have been a government that was recognized by the whole world. So I'm not saying Ashraf Ghani was a good man who planned this. He just left. Now, the first vice president, he went to Panjshir Valley to join the resistance. And he took with him this legitimacy from the Taliban. He took it. Had they stayed, the Taliban had already entered Kabul. They had circled the presidential palace. They would have forced them into signing over this government, handing over the government to the Taliban. Your question was, I forgot what your question was. We're talking about
Basically, what I'm getting at is what started happening to our partner forces.
So, yes, I remember. The U.S. had stopped contract support for the Afghan forces. As I said earlier, the U.S. was granting visas to the commanders and basically destroying whole units. The command was being removed, and soldiers basically had no one to give them orders. And so as the Taliban approached, these guys were out of ammunition. They had no air support. They had no medevac. They're injured or dying. There was no one to treat them. And the Taliban were advancing. And the Taliban did not come alone. They brought a lot of other terror networks with them. And so they kept pushing the Afghan forces. Some were overrun. Some, you can see videos of how they asked the Afghans to surrender. And when the Afghan forces ran out of ammunition, ran out of bullets, they did surrender. But then the Taliban massacred all of them. And this continued all the way until the Taliban reached Kabul. They took over Kabul. And at this point, the resistance had been declared. All of Panjshir Valley, the Panjshir province just north of Kabul, was the only province that had not fallen to the Taliban. It was getting besieged by the Taliban on a few different fronts, from the north, from the east, from the south, from the west, and now the Taliban were approaching from the south, from Kabul, in large numbers. But most of the commandos, even from as far as Helmand and Kandahar, they got in their vehicles and taxis and any other way they could. They all came to the Panjshir Valley to defend this one place, to rally here, and then start counter operations against the Taliban. So they were there. Unfortunately, even at that point when Mr. Biden and the whole world saw that the Taliban were right there and they had besieged Panjshir, even at this point, he refused to help the last democratic forces in Afghanistan. And so what happened was many, many people, members of the Afghan military, were executed by the Taliban.
Do you have an estimation of how many?
Thousands. It's hard to tell, man. But it's thousands.
What about their families?
When I went to Afghanistan, after the evacuations were over, when I went there were still dead bodies on the sides of the road, man. And it was still happening. It wasn't the end. They were still killing people. I saw Taliban had hanged individuals. I saw Taliban drowning a man in the river. All of these were what we call our Afghan allies, our Afghan partners. And it's continued. It's continuing. It's even happening right now as we speak. The oppression of women, revenge killings, looking for former Afghan military, government officials, civil society. They're still attacking them. They're still killing them.
Do you think they'll stop?
Absolutely not.
What is their goal?
The Taliban's goal. Are you familiar with what Al-Qaeda's goal is? ISIS's goal is?
What is it?
You are an unbeliever, according to them. Where you are, this is a camp of the unbelievers. They want to purify this. You are the end goal. I am the end goal. This is the end goal. And Al-Qaeda's goal, Taliban's goal, they're the same.
It never stops.
No. So, sometimes you hear people say, not people, again, State Department. These individuals who are inside the State Department in their cubicles, and they never leave. They say Al-Qaeda is a problem. Taliban is not a problem. There's Taliban 2.0 and Taliban 1.0. They say this. The reality on the ground is not that. It's different. The leader of the Taliban, Haibatullah Akhundzada, who's in Kandahar right now, you know what his title is? His title that it's mandatory for all Afghans to address him by that title. It's Amir al-Mu'mineen, the commander of the believers. Which believers? I'm a believer. I'm a practicing Muslim. I'm an American Muslim. That man thinks he's my commander. He's the commander and commander of all the Muslims in America, all the people in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, in India, in Indonesia, in Europe, in America, in Canada. He's the commander of all of them. Now you come and you tell me, State Department tells me, oh, but this is Taliban 2.0, this has changed. What you don't know is Taliban's ideology. There's no difference between Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Their ideology is identical. They're two sides of the same coin. They both want the same thing. They think that after Afghanistan, they're going to link up with the army of Mahdi. And this is basically the Judgment Day is nearby. It's around the corner. And so they're going to join, they're the army of Mahdi who's going to go to Damascus in Syria. And they're going to link up with the Messiah. I'm not kidding, the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And that this is the army that will link up with Jesus Christ, march on Jerusalem, take over Jerusalem, liberate Jerusalem, and then liberate the West, liberate America, liberate Canada. When ISIS and Al-Qaeda and these guys in Afghanistan, when they look at America, they don't see the United States of America. They see the Islamic States North America province, the Islamic States Latin American province, the Islamic States European province, just like Afghanistan to them is the Islamic States Khorasan province, ISKP, what you call them.
Wow. What happened to our allies' families? Are they being killed and persecuted as well?
Yes. The short answer is yes. Now, who's your ally? Is it the guy that was your interpreter, your barber, who's your advisor? Who's your ally? Is it the guy who, 95, 96% of the people in Afghanistan did not pick up a weapon to kill Americans when Americans were there? Aren't they your allies? So who's the ally? I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to all the viewers, all the listeners. Who's the ally? So are their families getting massacred and killed by the Taliban on a daily basis? Absolutely. But if your definition of an ally is interpreter, and your question is if that interpreter's family, mother, father, children are getting executed, yes.
So the Taliban's agenda in Afghanistan is to wipe out the entire ideology of anybody who took part in aiding the U.S., whether it was a barber, whether they were fighting alongside us, whether it was the government officials, their families, everybody.
Exactly. But first them, then you.
We'll get into us here in a minute.
Look,
let's get back to the evacuation. I want to cover the evacuation before we get into the weeds on this other stuff. Let's talk about how many people did we evacuate? How many people did the U.S. evacuate from Afghanistan?
The Biden administration claims it evacuated about 120-something thousand individuals.
120-something Taliban individuals?
1,000 individuals. 120,000.
Were any of those people vetted? Put through a background check.
You're a professional. You worked in the CIA. You tell me, is it possible to vet people, that many people, in 2 weeks while you're surrounded by Taliban, Afghani, ISIS, there's a suicide bombing, and all that chaos? You saw the stuff on TV. You tell me, is it possible to vet all of those individuals?
No.
Okay. Now, Mr. Biden can claim whatever he wants, and this is a free country. You can believe him or you can just say, no, give me the evidence. What I can tell you is this. About the veterans, most veterans involved in this, they're all in agreement in this, that about 70% of the people that Mr. Biden evacuated were not eligible to get any of the visas. They were not vetted. They don't know who they brought out. They're figured it out. They're figuring it out right now. They're learning who they brought out now while they're already here. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those individuals that we brought. If you said what I'm saying right now, they would call you racist, Islamophobe. They can't say the same thing to me. So there is a process. America is a very generous country. It gave me a home. It took me in. And this is This is going to continue. America has always been a generous country. It will continue to accept refugees legally, vetted correctly. But that is not what is happening right now. That is not what happened. Unvetted individuals, they were not the so-called allies, quote unquote. They don't know who they were. They were just people. And so this category of individuals that they brought, the whole of Afghanistan falls under that category. It's all your ally. Are you going to evacuate all 40 million of the Afghan people and bring them here? You tell me, is the evacuation the solution here? Or is it just a Band-Aid to this problem?
It's a Band-Aid.
Yeah. You were in Afghanistan too, right? You were deployed there. You trained the Afghan forces. You worked with them. Did you ever think that you were doing this in order to bring these guys and make them your neighbors in America? Or were you doing it so they could fight for their own country, defend their own country, keep terrorism at bay? And when Afghanistan is free and safe, America is safe. It's linked. Look at what happened on 9/11. Terrorism was in Afghanistan, America was attacked. Now the same thing has happened again. Now what some people are actually doing right now is they're even evacuating the Afghan commandos. They're evacuating or lobbying to evacuate Afghan intelligence officers, Afghan commandos, tactical teams, pilots. The very individuals who took the oath to defend the Constitution of Afghanistan, the people of Afghanistan, now they're evacuating them and bringing them here to the United States. And once they come to the United States, they're not going to be pilots. They're not going to be CIA. They're not going to become generals in the US military. They probably won't even be able to join the military. So what they end up doing here is gas station clerks, Uber drivers. Nothing wrong with those jobs, and nothing wrong with some of those individuals, all of those individuals being here. But if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, try to justify to me that bringing these professionals, trained individuals here is better than for them to be in their own birth country and their homes with their families and fight for their country, defend their country, save their country. And once again, when Afghanistan is safe, America is safe.
What do our former allies think of us now?
It depends on who you talk to. Depends. Some are very pissed. Some feel naturally very, very betrayed and abandoned, because it's not the first time America has done something like this to the people in Afghanistan. America abandoned the people in Afghanistan after the Cold War. 2 million Afghans died in that war. That was not a Cold War between Afghanistan and the Soviet Union. Afghans made so much sacrifices in that war for freedom. But once the war was over, America abandoned Afghanistan. In 1996, when the Taliban came to power, there was many things America could do. America betrayed Afghanistan, abandoned it. 2001, after we went in there, we didn't give the Afghan people what they wanted, a decentralized system of governance. Instead, we gave them Mr. Hamid Karzai. We gave them Ashraf Ghani. We gave them, during the Bonn conference, we gave them what we thought was good for Afghans. What America thought, what Zalmay Khalilzad thought was good for Afghans. We gave them that. And now in 2020, 2021, so between 2001 and 2021, the evacuations, do you know how many Afghan soldiers laid down their lives, made the ultimate sacrifice? Half of the Afghan army were killed by the Taliban between that time, 2001 to 2021. Half the Afghan army. And then Mr. Joe Biden decides to abandon them. And you know what he said when he was doing this? He said, we, America, gave them everything we could. One thing we could not give them was the will to fight. We gave them everything we could. We could not give them the will to fight. You know, the people in Afghanistan were fighting the Taliban and Al-Qaeda long before Joe Biden even knew what Al-Qaeda and Taliban was. I doubt he still knows what Taliban and Al-Qaeda are, because if he did, he would not be calling them good Taliban. He would not be saying from the White House podium that America is working with the Taliban. This is chaos, Sean.
I know it is.
And it's happening before everyone's eyes, and people are not even noticing it. So during the evacuations, what became known as the Abbey Gate bombing, a few days before this, the National Resistance Front, the resistance that had already been declared, members of the Afghan government intelligence commandos were there. They received reports and they notified the US that the Taliban will carry out suicide bombings at the airport. And this is the only way the Taliban will be able to take control of the airport and push America out. And they may blame it on Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or any of their other buddies. But there were warnings coming from the resistance that the Taliban were planning suicide bombings. Now, 13 service members died in that attack. That's not going to change. We cannot bring them back to life. It's a tragedy what happened. Many American soldiers were wounded. Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews, look at that kid. Look at what happened to him. About 200 Afghans were also killed.
For those that don't know, he's lost a leg. He's lost his arm.
And an arm, yeah.
He's lost all his friends.
Yes.
His entire life is different now.
It is.
It's
It
completely...
But they say ISIS did this attack. They were so quick to say ISIS carried out this Abbey Gate bombing attack. It may be right, it may be wrong, but why are you not talking about the fact that Taliban had 1,000 suicide bombers positioned all over HKaya? 1,000 suicide bombers. Their commander was Hadi, Taliban commander named Hadi. He's with the Haqqani network. Haqqani, Sirajuddin Haqqani, his nickname is the father of suicide bombers. He was 10 minutes away from the airport. The Biden administration were very quick into saying this is based on intelligence. Our intelligence, this is ISIS that did this attack. Now, it's the same intelligence that Mr. Biden received it's the same intelligence. After the Abbey Gate bombing, he ordered a strike against the mastermind of that ISIS attack. And the same individuals who told him this is an ISIS attack also told him the mastermind is right there in Kabul. He's planning more attacks. So Mr. Biden orders a drone strike against that vehicle carrying the ISIS mastermind. And everyone in that vehicle dies. General Mark Milley at the Pentagon, he said, we can confirm that this was the ISIS mastermind, and he was on his way to carry out more terror attacks, more IED attacks. And how we know this is because of the secondary explosions. There were journalists in Afghanistan, and some of them decided to go and investigate this, the aftermath of that attack. It turned out that supposed that mastermind of ISIS mastermind was an aid worker.
I remember this.
The people in the backseat, 7 children, innocent children. What they called the secondary explosions were water bottles, water splashing everywhere. So that was the intelligence. That's how wrong the intelligence was at that time. And yet they were so quick into saying this is an ISIS terrorist attack.
Did we even have any intelligence in that country at that time? Or had everybody moved into the airport?
Mr. Biden and his State Department were relying on the Taliban for intelligence.
So the U.S. Hold on. So the U.S.'s intelligence in Afghanistan at that time was coming from the Taliban a terrorist organization?
I don't say this. The State Department says this. Mr. Thomas West, the current U.S. Special Envoy to Afghanistan, says this, that he, at the airport, was working with the Taliban, relying on the Taliban. The U.S., we were losing the intelligence collection capability in Afghanistan as this thing was happening. And today, 2.5 years after all of this, America has lost 98% of its collection capability in Afghanistan.
98%.
Absolutely.
So we have virtually zero intelligence on the ground in Afghanistan, which is essentially a breeding ground for how many terrorist organizations?
27 terrorist organizations and growing every day.
Where do you get your intelligence from?
So the National Resistance Front, the last democratic forces in Afghanistan led by His Excellency Commander Ahmad Massoud, it's a resistance. It has a battlefield wing, headquarters. It has an intelligence wing, a political wing. The best intelligence, the most reliable, accurate intelligence comes from the National Resistance Front. No one has anything close to it. There is no one else. It's only the resistance versus 27 different terrorist organizations.
How are you involved in the resistance?
I am a member of the NRF. I lead the organization Vets for NRF, which is a U.S. veteran organization that gives voice and supports the last democratic forces in Afghanistan, led by Commander Massoud. We're all in support of him. We support them, the NRF, in the continuation of the war against terrorism. We believe, as veteran, I believe this war has not ended. And the resistance on the ground, they don't think this war has ended. They see that this war has not ended. On a daily basis, they're carrying out operations against Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Taliban, Haqqani, and all of these other terror networks. And in fact, I have brought a list of all the recent operations for you. I'll give that to you in the month of March, and you will see dates, time, location, how many Taliban terrorists were killed, how many Al-Qaeda were killed. And this is continuing. The resistance is continuing against them.
What kind of equipment does the resistance have?
Everything that they had been assigned by the Afghan government. So the bulk of the NRF is Afghan commandos, KKA, the Qata'at Khas, and intelligence officers from NDS, regular Afghan army, and then volunteers from Afghanistan. So their equipment is a mixture of weapons from, and this is not a lot, a few from the last resistance against the Taliban from 1996, and then they have some of those weapons that those soldiers were able to bring with them as the country was, province was falling to the Taliban and they were coming into Panjshir. They started bringing in some of their vehicles, ammo, M4s, M16s, heavy weapons. They brought all of them to Panjshir. But it's not enough.
What happened to all of the equipment, the weapons, the vehicles, the ammunition, the night vision that the U.S. had there stockpiled that we were using for the past 20 years? What happened to all that?
The Taliban have all of them. And it's not just the Taliban. The Taliban, we're talking about $86 billion worth of bases, equipment, military equipment, and the items that you mentioned. All were left for the Taliban. And the Taliban are very generous with their brethren in Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And so ISIS has those weapons, Al-Qaeda has them, Hamas has them, Haqqani has them, Pakistani Taliban, Tehreek-e-Taliban, they have them, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Kashmiri jihadists in Afghanistan have them, Ansarullah of Tajikistan is in Afghanistan, they have weapons. The Taliban have given those weapons to everyone. Those weapons that America left behind, they're even found in places like Yemen. They're found in North Africa. They're found in the current conflict between Israel and Hamas. All of these weapons were left behind. This is basically the way I look at it, it's the last gift-wrapped item that Mr. Biden left for the Taliban. And they're using that against the Afghan people. And once again, I'll say it once again, once they're done with the Afghan people, they're going to continue marching west.
We'll get into that. On that note, let's take a quick break.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a minute since I've done a Bubs Naturals commercial, but it has not been a minute since I've taken the best shit of my entire life. Actually, just knocked one out this morning. It was amazing. And I'm going to give you the secret. You ready? Here's the secret. You want the secret for the best shit of your entire life that you could do, I don't know, every day, maybe multiple times a day? Here's the secret. Bubs Naturals Collagen Peptide says it's good for joints, hair, skin, and nails. I'm surprised they don't put on there it'll give you the best shit of your entire life, but hey, I get it, right? And you mix that with the Halo Creamer that's MCT oil. Put these two together, you're gonna have a explosive hell of a day. These things are both Whole30 approved, NSF certified, and USDA approved. So there's that. On top of that, hold on, wait, there's more. If that doesn't get you going, which I guarantee you it will, you've got Bub's new coffee. So this is the first ever coffee bean Whole30 approved, if you can believe that. And we all know coffee can, speed things up a little bit in the morning. But hold on, wait, there's more. Apple cider vinegar gummies. Guys, I'm going to be honest, I don't know exactly what these things do for you, but here it says, promotes energy, immune support, promotes healthy digestion, and supports healthy metabolism. I can tell you one thing, good luck just eating one of these things, because at the end of the night, I will crush an entire bottle of these. That will not give you the best shit of your life. I wouldn't recommend it. It will speed things up, but you may not like the final outcome. And hold on, wait, there's more. There's more. Bubs came out with a lot of new products. They have these hydrate or die hydration packets, great for post-workout. All this stuff is great for post-workout, especially the collagen protein. Guys, here's another thing about Bubs. Bubs is a tribute company. It's named after Glenn Bubs Doherty, who was a Navy SEAL and a CIA contractor. He died defending our freedom in Benghazi, and Bubs donates a portion of every order to the Glenn Doherty Foundation, and they donate 100% of the proceeds from their products on Veterans Day every year. I love this company. They are just solid people with a solid product, and they just want everybody to experience the best shit of your life. Go to bubsnaturals.com, use the promo code Sean for 20% off, and let's get it going. Over the past several years, Vigilance Elite Patreon has fueled what you now see today, The Sean Ryan Show. Because of our patrons and their support, it has enabled us to produce the best quality productions that you see weekly, including our small team that continues to grow. I've done a complete restructure of Vigilance Elite Patreon in 2024 by adding new and improved tiers and giving them a unique name. Tier 1 is now known as the Seeker, Tier 2 is known as the Protector, and Tier 3 is now known as the Defender. And our newest tier, Tier 4, is known as the Patriots. One of our top benefits by joining Tier 1 is getting early access to all of the Sean Ryan shows. This includes both audio and video. Our Tier 2 option houses the old school tactical training library that is still used today, along with our newest benefit, a behind-the-scenes take of The Sean Ryan Show. I also include my file notes that give you a rundown of what me and my guests will discuss during the next episode. Tier 3 is the next option that allows you to have an end-of-the-month Zoom call with me, 24-hour early access merch drops, and a chance to be featured in The Sean Ryan Show by asking a question for me to ask the guest. Our last tier is for those that are committed to the cause and expect nothing in return, although you will get access to all tiers 1, 2, and 3. No matter how big or small your contribution has been on Vigilance Elite Patreon, it has made a huge impact on the success of The Sean Ryan Show. You see, without you, there would be no show, there would be no team to support me, and the thousands and thousands, possibly millions of lives that we've been able to have positive impacts on would have never happened. And for that, I would like to personally thank you. You can join me today for as little as $5 a month by visiting Vigilance Elite Patreon. Reports say 60% of U.S. pork production comes from one company owned by the Chinese, and their hogs are giving something called ractopamine, which is banned in 160 countries, to include China. Yet you find it in your grocery store aisle every day. There's a better way. I'd like to tell you about Moink. Moink delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef, lamb, pastured pork, chicken, and sustainable wild-caught Alaskan salmon straight to your door. Moink farmers farm like our grandparents did, and as a result, Moink meat tastes like it should, because the family farm just does it better. The Moink difference is a difference you can taste, and you can feel good knowing you're helping family farms stay financially independent too. You choose the meat delivered in every box, like ribeyes to chicken breasts to pork chops to salmon fillets and much more. Plus, you can cancel at any time. Plus, they guarantee you'll say oink oink, and I'm just so happy I got moinked. So keep American farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/Sean right now, and listeners of this show get free bacon for a year. That's 1 year of the best bacon you will ever taste, but it's only for a limited time. Spelled MOINK box.com/Sean. That's moinkbox.com/Sean. All right, legend, we're back from the break. We still have a lot to cover. I want to talk about Taliban-China relations before we get into the money train that America's sending to the Taliban. What is it, 40 million a week or something? But we'll get into that. But I want to talk about how China's involvement, when it started. It was, to my understanding, that negotiations between China and the Taliban actually started before August 31st, 21. Is that true?
That
with
is
the
true.
lithium.
That is true.
When did that start?
So the relationship between China and Taliban started when we were there, the peak of fighting. China started supporting the Taliban, giving weapons and funding to the Taliban in order to put pressure on America to get out.
What year did that start? How long before the withdrawal?
Well, you see, talking about China, you're talking about a very powerful country who doesn't leave evidence behind. Not that easy. So it's hard to pinpoint it, but you could say this thing started around 2006, 2007, maybe 2005.
That
when
early?
the Taliban started their operations against America.
When did you start noticing Chinese officials just blatantly negotiating with Taliban in Kabul?
You see that happening after the evacuation. So I'll tell you this. So President Biden ordered the withdrawal, and it took place on August 31, 21. 2 days later, on September 2, a plane took off from China, landed in Bagram Airfield in Parwan province. Large, huge military installation built originally by the Russians when they had invaded Afghanistan. And then it's such a strategic and important location that was the US's headquarters. And during this entire time that we were there, America was there. And so billions of dollars have been spent on this Bagram airfield. It has a 12,000-foot runway, one of the busiest runways during the war. Anywhere in the world was Bagram airfield. Bagram is so huge, I don't know if you've ever been there, as you know, it can house 15, 20,000 personnel. It's a huge base. There are restaurants, shops, everything is inside that base. It's a very modern city inside Afghanistan. And so this plane from China landed in Bagram Airfield carrying about 150 Chinese nationals. And they immediately started giving life back to Bagram. So when the US had left a few months ago, left Bagram, not Afghanistan, just Bagram, abandoned it, the Taliban, who were in the Safi Mountains around Bagram, came in and to some extent destroyed Bagram. And then as the evacuations were happening, the Taliban decided to release all the prisoners, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, that were also in Bagram. So those prisoners started damaging the base. And so 2 days after the withdrawal, September 2, 2021, this plane carrying 150 Chinese, it landed in Bagram and it started rebuilding it. Within about 2 weeks, more planes from China landed in Bagram Airfield. And since then, there has been a consistent amount of approximately 350 Chinese nationals in Bagram, and they never leave. They have no reason to leave.
So would you say September of 21 is the first time that the Chinese overtly showed presence in Afghanistan?
September 2.
September
2 days after we left.
Yeah, I meant September of 2021.
Yeah, and that's not all, though. It's worse than that. China is helping the Taliban build a military division. There's a defense company in China called Norenco. It's a big defense company, a weapons manufacturer. They have held so many meetings with the Taliban's defense ministry. Now, the Taliban's defense minister is Mullah Yaqub, son of the founder of the Taliban. Mullah Omar's son today is the defense minister in Afghanistan. He has held many meetings with Norenco, and so have other Taliban officials. And so Norenco is known as a company that gives arms, military equipment, surveillance equipment in exchange for minerals. These are called arms for minerals deals. And so they have been giving the Taliban new technology. Huawei, a Chinese company, through Norenco has installed over 100,000 cameras in Kabul alone, and also in elsewhere in strategic places in Afghanistan. They have given the Taliban a state-of-the-art surveillance system.
Did you just say 100,000 cameras?
In Kabul.
Is this these AI-type cameras that with facial recognition?
A surveillance system. They have it in China. They're giving the same thing to the Taliban. And that's not even it. The Chinese are involved and they have signed with the Taliban billions of dollars worth of contracts to extract minerals from Afghanistan. All of these are illegal mining extractions. And so the Chinese are involved in extracting lithium. And Afghanistan is the world's largest. It has the world's largest deposit of lithium. And so it's lithium. Chinese are extracting gold, other rare earth minerals in Afghanistan, copper.
For those that don't know, lithium is what all of the batteries are made out of. That you hear about the green initiative that people are pushing. That's the interest. So here in the U.S., Chinese are producing all of our green initiative power supplies by basically infiltrating Afghanistan and creating these minerals for weapons deals with the Taliban.
Absolutely. In fact, that phone in your pocket right now, that has a lithium battery. And so when China extracts all of this lithium, who are they going to sell it to? Back to the United States. Yes. And it's not even the end. The Taliban sent one of their commanders, a terrorist, to China who met with the president of China, Xi Jinping. And the Chinese president accepted his credentials and handed over to him the embassy of Afghanistan in China. Similarly, the Chinese have sent their own ambassadors to Kabul, who has been recognized by the leader of the Taliban. They have, short of that official officially the president of that country, that Communist Party, saying, I have recognized the Taliban. Short of that statement, there is relationships on so many levels, military, political, business, between China and the Taliban controlled Afghanistan. Chinese are building warehouses in Afghanistan in the middle of nowhere. In the middle of nowhere. So as a investor from America, as an honest businessman, you wouldn't go and spend $500 in that place. It's in the middle of nowhere, but not China. This is all part of that Road and Belt Initiative of China, $1 trillion worth of project, a huge project that intends to connect all of Asia to Europe. So China has long-term goals. And now you want to know what the U.S. is doing to counter China? Nothing.
Nothing.
Yes, State Department said they're doing nothing.
Is China helping the Taliban build infrastructure within the major cities and provinces as well? I know they're doing a lot of that in Africa. Or is it solely weapons for minerals?
So they are building infrastructures, like I said. Now, again, it's really hard to tell without, like I said,
road systems.
Yes.
Buildings.
Absolutely.
I'm not just talking about the mining camps.
Absolutely. Everything that is required to connect all of Central Asia to Europe, all of it. Everything that is required, warehouses, roads, China is investing. They're building it for the Taliban, to help the Taliban. Because this not only helps the Taliban, you can say this. China doesn't really care about the Taliban. China has bigger plans than Taliban. Taliban is a useful idiot to China. Mm-hmm. They're using him. But it is happening right now. Like I said, what worries me the most is that China's intention is not just Afghanistan. It's bigger than that, way bigger than that. It's America. And America has done nothing in Afghanistan to counter even that part of this, the Chinese part of it.
Yeah. Very troubling. Let's talk about, it's smart on their part.
Yes.
Very smart. Let's talk about how the U.S. is funding Taliban.
Oh, that's a hard statement to say, right? Yes.
It is.
So briefly, I'll tell you this. When this evacuation was happening, the Afghan people had about $7 billion of their money in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York for safekeeping. After the evacuations, President Biden decided to cut this money in two, send $3.5 billion to Switzerland. He said the reason he did this was because the survivors of and the family members of the victims of the terrorist attack of 9/11, their lawyers were trying to get a portion of this money because now that the Taliban were in power in Kabul. And because the Taliban had a role in 9/11 by giving safe haven to bin Laden and support to bin Laden, well, then they can sue the Taliban now. But the way the rest of us saw this is America is a system. There are laws. It's not easy for somebody to for one victim to just take money from another victim. It's not the right thing to do, and it will not happen in any court. So the money was safe right here. That money being here in the United States meant that money would not go to terrorists in control of Afghanistan. But what Mr. Biden did is he cut it in two, kept $3.5 billion here in the U.S., and then transferred the other $3.5 billion to Switzerland in a bank account that is called the Afghan Trust Fund. Now he assigned one individual from the State Department on the board, one individual from the Switzerland government is on the board, and then there are two Afghans. One of those Afghans is an Afghan American. His name is Shami Rabi. Now, Shami Rabi, his job, the whole point of this trust fund is to make sure that this money benefits the Afghan people, not the Taliban. Now, Shami Rabi is a board member of the Afghan Trust Fund. At the same time, he's a board member currently serving. He's a member of the Taliban Supreme Council at the central bank, at the Taliban-controlled central bank. The other individual, Anwar Ahadi, he's a very weird man. He believes in one-party rule in Afghanistan, where he thinks only one tribe in Afghanistan has the authority to rule in Afghanistan. He's what, some ways you could say he's very racist. But this other individual, Anwar Ahadi, he used to work for the Taliban during the first Taliban reign. Now he's in charge of the $3.5 billion. And this $3.5 billion, it has been accumulating, generating interest. It's been there for over 2.5 years. It has generated about $200 million in interest. Now, what is their plan, what they have or are doing with that interest money? Some of that is used to, I'll back up a little bit. Afghanistan's money is not printed in Afghanistan. It's printed in Poland and in France. Okay? Now, there is cost associated with printing currency, Afghan currency. And so they have offered to pay for the printing cost of that fund, that money, unlimited amount of money that will go to the Taliban-controlled central bank. Another way, they have offered to give, pay for the booklets, the passport booklets. Afghan passports, the booklets are not printed in Afghanistan. They're also printed in Europe. Now, there's a cost associated with that. They have offered to pay for that. Now, once those passport booklets, millions and millions of them, are printed, they're shipped to Afghanistan and given to none other than Sirajuddin Haqqani, his passport department. And then he issues it every Thursday, Holy Warrior Day, at the passport department. He gives it to them, generating more money.
Is this negligence or is this on purpose?
Knowing that Mr. Biden is very familiar, the Secretary of State Antony Blinken is very familiar with one of the board members and his wife from the time when Mr. Joe Biden was Chairman Joe Biden of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Now, the wife of that board member, Anwar Ahadi, is none other than Fatima Gailani. Fatima Gailani is a very interesting woman. If you just Google her name, you will be surprised with the things she has to say that support the Taliban, her pro-Taliban statements. She has known Mr. Joe Biden since 2001, right after the 9/11 attacks. In fact, Joe Biden very heavily relied on the advice of Fatima Gailani while he was Senate Foreign Relations Committee making decisions that would affect the future of Afghanistan. There are a number of key individuals in this whole thing, from going back to the first, the resistance against the Soviet Union. Those same individuals were there when 9/11 happened. They were there when America was about to go at war. They had a very important role in propping up Hamid Karzai to be the president. They were friends with Ashraf Ghani. They, in fact, had roles in the Afghan government. And then during the evacuations, these same individuals were involved. And now, when the Taliban are back in power, those same individuals are the decision makers. Anwar Ahadi, Shamir Rabi, Fatima Gailani, Zalmay Khalilzad. Someone needs to look into all of these individuals. They're not unknown. Zalmay Khalilzad, he was investigated by the FBI for money laundering while he was the US ambassador for Afghanistan.
So this isn't negligence.
It's by design. It looks that way from my point of view.
I don't see how you could see it any other way.
I agree. But then again, it's all up to the American people. What I can do through the Sean Ryan Show, through your platform, is give the people, these people that I love so much, give them this information. It's their government. Now, what you do at this point, after you have investigated these matters, that's the only thing that matters. You have that right to put that man in the White House, and you did. Now you have that right to take him out of the White House and put him back in his basement. Now I'm only speaking as an American veteran now. I have to be careful. It will be against every value that I have as an Afghan, as an American veteran, values that I was taught in the Army. I will not call myself a man if I vote for this man, for Joe Biden. I will be betraying every value that I have if I vote for this man. I know if Mr. Biden wins this election, the Taliban will stay in power for another 4 years. There's a good chance the Taliban will stay in power for another 4 years. Mr. Joe Biden has had so many opportunities to correct this with just one phone call. He has not. He can pick up a phone today, call Commander Massoud, call Mr. Amrullah Saleh, the acting president of Afghanistan, end this. He has not. And I don't think he will. And so I'm only going to talk to veterans at this point. Look, like all of you guys went and you served in Afghanistan and you sacrificed and you did all of these things, which are appreciated by the Afghan people. Now ask yourself, the question is not if the Afghan people, if we appreciate your sacrifices, because we do. And Commander Massoud has said this on Scott Mann's podcast. He's very grateful to the American veterans for their sacrifices. Ask if your commander-in-chief, if the current commander-in-chief appreciates your sacrifices. And then decide based on that. Decide whether you want to vote for this man. Once again.
That's a damn good point.
Look, and the simplest way I could say it right here, right now, American taxpayer money, your tax dollars, are funding the Taliban right now. And this has been going on since September 2021. On a weekly basis, the United States, the current administration, Mr. Joe Biden, has been sending $40 million, not from his own checking account. It's the U.S. payers, Americans' tax dollars. He's sending them $40 million cash every week that ends up in Afghanistan. And it's a very complex system. The money goes to the Afghanistan International Bank that lacks any authority to convert this dollar to Afghani, to auction it, right? And so this money, AIB gives it to the Taliban-controlled Central Bank of Afghanistan. When I say Central Bank, think Federal Reserves. So the money goes there. Now, who is in charge of Afghanistan's central bank right now? Nur Ahmad Agha, sanctioned terrorist, sanctioned by the United States for financing IED attacks against our soldiers that killed American soldiers. He runs the central bank. He gets $40 million every week. Now, once the money reaches the central bank, they hold what is called a bidding and auctioning session, where they invite individuals that are involved with the Hawala system, licensed money dealers. They invite them, and they're bidding. Everyone bids on who wants to buy this dollar and for how much. Now, the ones they invite are all individuals affiliated with the senior leadership of the Taliban or with the Haqqani network. They invite these individuals, and since 2021, consistently the winner every week is individuals linked to the Haqqani network. They get the money, they auction it, they convert it to Afghani, and Haqqani gets a portion. And then this money, the remaining, is given to what is called NGOs, local implementing partners in Afghanistan. Now, these NGOs that are in Afghanistan, about 900 or so, all of them came into existence after America left. These are all NGOs that their licenses were issued to them by the Taliban. So if basically what I'm saying is this, if you go to Afghanistan today to help our Afghan allies, our friends, and you want to open up an NGO, the Taliban will not give you a license. You're Sean Ryan.
Are these NGOs also Chinese mining camps?
I'm not sure.
Could it be possible that the U.S. is not only funding Taliban, but also Chinese mining camps?
I am not
Is
sure.
that a possibility?
Everything is possible in Afghanistan right
It's
now.
an NGO.
But these NGOs, they're all affiliates of the Taliban. Their licenses were given to them by the Taliban, and the Taliban will not give you a license, will not give me a license. They only give their own supporters licenses. So now this money reaches these NGOs, and from there, it's not even the end of story at that point. These NGOs, they either give a cut directly to the Taliban, or they distribute the aid in areas where there are Taliban fighters, suicide bombers, would-be suicide bombers, and suicide bombers who are already in hell. Their families get aid. And so U.S. taxpayer money right now is funding the Taliban. Now, your viewers may be shocked and they may say, oh, Legend is lying. It can't be possible that I am with the resistance, so I may be biased. I'm trying to help the resistance. Don't take my word for it. Listen to John Sopko, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. He's neither Panjshiri. John Sopko is not a member of the Taliban. He's certainly not a member of the NRF. His office came into existence because Congress mandated his office. He reports directly to the United States Congress, not to the administration. John Sopko testified before the United States Congress and said, I cannot assure the American people that their tax dollars are not funding the Taliban. Listen to him. It is happening right now. And it's like I said, it's your tax dollars. It's your tax dollars going to the very individuals who killed hundreds and thousands of American soldiers, injured so many Americans, killed hundreds of thousands of Afghans, and right now they're hosting Al-Qaeda and ISIS and everyone else who are planning to attack you again. And you're funding it. I'll tell you this, the situation is so bad. Back during the first reign of the Taliban, we used to say, the resistance used to say, if Pakistan used to be the main supporter, financial supporter of the Taliban back then. And the Afghans used to say, if Pakistan stopped supporting the Taliban will crumble in 1 year. Today, I'm telling you, if America stops supporting the Taliban, stopped sending 40 million to the Taliban, you will see the Taliban crumbling in under a year. The Taliban is a dying regime. The only thing that's keeping it alive at the moment, since 2021, is this $40 million injection that the U.S. keeps putting in the arms of this dying Taliban every week. It's that bad.
What about China?
We already discussed it. China
they're also helping.
Yes,
What do the regular Afghan people of the Chinese coming in, what do they think of that and helping the Taliban? And if they are building infrastructure that does improve the country, are they pro-Chinese?
Well, you said a few things. First, they're not building anything for Afghans. They're building stuff for that Red Road and Belt Initiative and surveillance system, which helps the Taliban. China is not there helping your Afghan ally. They're helping the Taliban. Everything they're doing either helps China's Road and Belt Initiative or it helps the Taliban.
Do they realize that?
The Afghan people? Of course they realize it. But you're talking about a poor, oppressed people who the moment they say something, in an hour, the Taliban will execute them. Mm-hmm. There is no freedom of speech in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. What I have said to you right now, if I had said 2% of this publicly in Afghanistan, I would be executed by now. Yes. So the Afghans, they don't have a voice here. Now, we are their voice. You're their voice. You can be their voice. And this is something that can be stopped right now. This cash could be stopped right now. It just takes one phone call from the president, but it's not happening.
Do you have anything more to say on Pakistan-Taliban relations?
Oh, yes, a lot.
Let's go into that.
I'll tell you this, Shaw. What the veterans don't realize, veterans actually do realize this. It's the American people that don't realize it. The amount of pain Pakistan has inflicted upon America has never happened before. Behind all of the problems that America had in that region and still faces all the threats is the hand of the Pakistani government, the general headquarters, and the Pakistani ISI, their CIA, Pakistani CIA, basically. Look at what the Pakistanis did, how they harbored the Taliban and bin Laden when we went in. So going back to 2001 now, all the Taliban commanders went into Pakistan. They were given safe haven in Quetta and Peshawar and Islamabad, protected by the Pakistanis. They held weddings in Pakistan, out in the public. The Pakistanis knew about it. They didn't do anything. Now, 2003, 2004, when the Taliban started coming back to Afghanistan to carry out attacks, who funded them? The Pakistanis. All of the veterans listening to this, they know what I'm talking about when I say IED attacks in Afghanistan. They all faced it. Where did the ammonium nitrate for those IEDs come from? Afghanistan does not produce ammonium nitrate. In fact, ammonium nitrate has been banned in Afghanistan since the days of the king, and ammonium nitrate is the main component in that IED. Where did it come from? It didn't come from Mars. It didn't land in Afghanistan. Somebody gave that to the Taliban. Now investigate that. Pakistan produces ammonium nitrate, and everyone knew this. No one did anything about it. Everyone knew that Pakistani ISI and and their army was giving ammonium nitrate to the dealers in Pakistan, and they were shipping it across the border to Afghanistan, which were used in killing American soldiers. Look at Congressman Brian Mast of Florida. If you ever go in Congress and you see him, you will quickly realize that the guy is a wounded veteran. He used to be Staff Sergeant Brian Mast. Now he's congressman. He doesn't have legs. What happened to his legs? He was deployed to Afghanistan. He served in Helmand and Kandahar. There was an IED attack. He lost his legs. Where did the ammonium nitrate come from? Back then, he was Staff Sergeant Brian Mast. He didn't have authority to do anything about it. Now he's Congressman Brian Mast. He's in a position to get the answers. For all the other veterans, for me, for you, for himself, where did that ammonium nitrate come from? Talk about the August 27th attack, Abbey Gate bombing. Where did the ammonium nitrate come from? Look at Tyler Vargas Andrews and his condition, right? We spoke about him earlier. Where did that ammonium nitrate come from?
Pakistan.
While Pakistanis were doing this, you know what the US government was doing? Under President Bush, to some extent, a lot under President Obama. The US government gave upwards of $70 billion to the Pakistani military and ISI while they were funding the Taliban, while they were hosting bin Laden, while the Taliban were carrying out attacks against American soldiers. American government was giving money to the Pakistanis. For counter-terrorism purposes, they called it. Do you know where bin Laden was found? Outside of Pakistan's West Point. Pakistan's West Point. They were hosting him. That same year that SEALs, you guys went and killed bin Laden, that same year Pakistan was given about $3 billion for counter-terrorism purposes. And they used that same money and they gave it to the Taliban, and it ended up in Afghanistan in form of ammunition and ammonium nitrate, and it killed American soldiers. There is so much that the Pakistani government has done. It's just unimaginable, the amount of pain that they have caused. Those Gold Star families, those wounded veterans, 50,000 wounded veterans from the Afghan war. About 70% of all the casualties, 60% of all the casualties, our casualties, American casualties in Afghanistan, were as a result of IED. If you go to Arlington National Cemetery and look for the graves of 100 American soldiers from the Afghan war, out of those 100, 60 of them died as a result of ammonium nitrate. As a result of ammonium nitrate that was given to the Taliban by the Pakistani ISI. No one is talking about it.
Well, there will be now.
I hope so.
Does Iran tie into this at all?
Yes,
How so?
to some extent. Well, the reason Pakistan supported Taliban were for different reasons, ideological reasons. The reason Iranians, to a certain extent, and I'll give you a bit background. During the first reign of the Taliban, when the Taliban had first come to power in 1996, Iran used to support the resistance to fight against the Taliban. They had no links with the Taliban. Iran, in fact, back then almost went to war. They had their forces at the border and were about to go and destroy the Taliban regime. You know who stopped it? The United Nations. But Iran at that point was supporting the resistance. The reason certain factions along the border of Iran started supporting the Taliban while we were there was to put pressure on America to leave. Now keep in mind, America was in Iraq, America was in Afghanistan, Iran is right in the middle. I don't agree with what the Iranians did, the government of Iran did, as far as supporting the Taliban while we were there, but their reason was not the same as the reason of the Pakistanis. Iran wanted America out of the picture, and I think they made a mistake because they didn't think about the second order effect of their decision. So they gave money to the Taliban, not a lot, some, and the EU to put pressure on the US to leave, and we left. And now Iran is left with the Taliban. And so they cannot stop the support for the Taliban all of a sudden, and they certainly don't want to give any funding to the Taliban. So they're stuck. They don't know what to do. America left, Taliban are there. And they pose a threat to everyone, the Iranians, the Pakistanis. There are suicide bombings inside Pakistan. On a daily basis, the Taliban attack Pakistanis, and they kill Pakistani soldiers on a daily basis. Pakistan raised a snake, it fed a snake, hoping and thinking that this snake would only bite its neighbor to the west in Afghanistan. Now that snake has come to Pakistan. It's like chickens come home to roost, right? Now America is making the same mistake that the Pakistanis made. Now America is funding the Taliban, hoping that the Taliban will not go international. But, they will go international. It's coming. That next big attack against America is coming. That snake Mr. Biden is funding right now will turn around and bite us.
There's not a doubt in my mind. How do you envision that happening? Is it going to look like what just happened in Russia a couple of weeks ago?
That was a tragedy, right? What happened in Russia, ISIS attack. ISIS Khorasan claimed the responsibility. Will it look like that? Maybe. I'll tell you one thing that we discussed this on a podcast with Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, Commander Massoud, and Congressman Waltz. And I stated there, whatever the next big attack is against America, I don't know when it is coming, but I'll tell you this. It's going to make 9/11 look like a dress rehearsal. It's going to make 9/11 look like a walk in the park. None of these guys, as Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann says, none of these guys want to come in second place. If you look at their history and the attacks they have carried out against America, embassy, consulate generals, then moved on to USS Cole, then that first World Trade bombing, and then the big 9/11. So it keeps increasing. So that next one, whatever it is, whenever it comes, it's going to make that 9/11 attack look like a dress rehearsal. Is it going to be planes again going into buildings? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe it will be at the border, individuals coming from the southern border. Maybe there will be an attack at LAX airport, at Ronald Reagan airport. Maybe it will be multiple.
I mean, that's how I envision it happening.
Those
I
guys are
envision
not.
lots and lots of incidents like what we just saw in Russia, all scattered throughout the United States. It puts a lot of fear into everyone.
Lone wolf attacks, small cells, pressure cooker bomb, like the Boston Marathon bombing, that Pulse nightclub. Yes, except plenty of them.
Do you have any idea how many terrorists have infiltrated the U.S. up to this point?
The CIA knows, the FBI knows. I'll tell you this. Since 2021 withdrawal, about 40 to 50 individuals on FBI's watch list, on terror watch list, have been apprehended at the southern border, trying to cross into the United States. Those were the ones that were caught out of the 8 million that tried to get in this time frame since Mr. Biden's administration started. Now, in that group of 40-something individuals, there are individuals, military-age males, with Afghan passports that were issued to them after we left by none other than Sirajuddin Haqqani. And these are the guys, like I said, that were caught. How many getaways? Are they in Idaho? Are they in Wyoming, in Montana? I don't know. And these are not necessarily Afghans, people who were born in Afghanistan. Within a week, I can make you Mullah Sean Ryan. You just need money. Give it to Haqqani Network. Give it to Sirajuddin Haqqani, and he's going to make you a Haji Sean Ryan, Mullah Sean Ryan, give you a different date of birth, give you a passport. Who controls the passport department in Afghanistan? Sirajuddin Haqqani, wanted terrorist, wanted by the FBI, $10 million bounty on his head, wanted by the State Department, $10 million bounty on his head. He controls the passport department. He's been issuing passports since 2021. In fact, I'll tell you this, and you may not know this. Every Thursday since 2021 withdrawal in Afghanistan is called Holy Warrior Day at the passport department, where the office is closed for the rest of the public. It's only open to holy warriors.
Are you
Taliban,
serious?
ISIS, Al-Qaeda. I am not kidding. It's Holy Warrior Day. Do you know how much money Haqqani made, Sirajuddin Haqqani and the Haqqani Network made, issuing passports since 2021?
No.
$40 million in profits. He made another $5 million issuing Afghan Tazkira, ID cards, like driver license. Who controls Kabul airport? Sirajuddin Haqqani. Kabul, let me add this, correction, Kabul International Airport. Who controls it? Siraj Haqqani. Siraj Haqqani, think of Siraj Haqqani as this, and his role in the security of Kabul International Airport. He's the TSA of Kabul International Airport. We have TSA, we have TSA all over, in every airport in the US. I mean, they have made life hell for travelers, for Americans, but they're there for a reason. They're looking for terrorists. In their mind, maybe the terrorists will come again and come through the airport, take a flight, and come here and they will arrest them. So they're the last line of defense. No one is focused on, even in the case of 9/11, no one talks about how those individuals left wherever they came from, who gave them US visas. They didn't come illegally, they came with US visas. Somebody gave them US visas. Is anyone focused on that part of it? And now, just like we have a TSA here at LAX, at Nashville Airport, who's keeping an eye on Kabul International Airport, the departure destination? You're focused on the landing destination, not on the departure destination. In fact, the departure destination is controlled by Sirajuddin Haqqani. Am I making sense?
Yeah. It's hard to believe, but you're making a lot of sense. I mean, it's when do you think we'll start to see these attacks?
If we compare the first reign of the Taliban to today and the presence of foreign terrorists in Afghanistan, in terms of timeline and history, I would say we're somewhere in 1999. Maybe a year, 2 years. Al-Qaeda is in Afghanistan. ISIS is there. You're already seeing it. You've seen suicide bombings in Iran. You've seen suicide bombings in Pakistan. You've seen suicide bombings in Moscow. There was an attempt to blow up, if I'm not mistaken, your Swedish parliament by ISIS. It's already happening. There was a young man from the state of Maine. Not too long ago, he picked up a machete and started attacking New York cops because he was inspired by the Taliban. There are gangs in California who are receiving inspiration from the Taliban. They're talking about how they went to how the 12 Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, and they're showing Taliban flags. They're talking about the repression of women carried out by the Taliban, but they don't see it as repression. This is Islamic, they say. This is part of Islam. You literally have American youth brainwashed by the Taliban right here. They think what happened in 2021 was a victory of the Taliban, a military victory of the Taliban, a military victory. They think the Taliban are glorious heroes. This is really what's happening right here.
What do you think they're waiting for? Why haven't they hit us yet?
It's a long-term thing. And like I said, don't say they haven't already attempted. They have. Like I said, individuals on terror watch lists were apprehended.
Yeah,
now, if they
it's
had not been
impossible. With
apprehended,
that many people coming across the border, it is impossible to keep tabs. I mean, they have no idea who's coming through.
Exactly.
None whatsoever. And so to be able to, they caught 50 out of how many? Did you say it was 8? Is it 16 million? I can't remember. The
about
number
8 million
changes.
getaways, I think.
Is it 8 million?
About 8 million that have illegally.
So they caught 50
Yeah. And these are the 50
in
they
a
have
pool
caught.
of 8 million people.
I'll tell you this. In San Diego, in jail, there, Border Patrol, honorable, brave men and women, Border Patrol, they caught one about 2 weeks ago. And he's still in jail. It doesn't, that threat that this individual, his passport issued with him by Haqqani Network, he's on a terror watch list, this has not made headlines. None of the mainstream media are talking about it. The American people, they don't even know.
I don't know if they want to know. I think the American people are becoming very accustomed to just, they want to be lied to. They want to be told everything's okay. And it's getting worse. Do you think that maybe that the terrorist organizations haven't struck yet because things are wide open right now? It's easy to infiltrate. Do you think they'll wait until there's stronger leadership, until infrastructure begins to lock up and not allow them through? Are they patient enough for that?
They're very patient. They're very patient. But is that why they haven't? I'm not going to say it. I honestly, I can take guesses, but I don't know. Maybe the day you release this, there will be a terrorist attack. Do I think it is coming? Absolutely. Do I know exactly why they haven't done it? I don't know. But are they here? Yes.
Do you think that Taliban and or other terrorist organizations are infiltrating our government? Do you think they are getting involved in local elections like the cartels?
I don't know. Maybe not. But do they have lobbyists, supporters? Taliban in neckties and suits in Washington, D.C.? Absolutely. Yes, they're there. They have been there for so long. Just have a look at the speech of the current U.S. Special Envoy to Afghanistan, Mr. Thomas West. He's really whitewashing the Taliban. Zalmay Khalilzad, he wants more collaboration with the Taliban. The U.S. Chargé to Afghanistan, Karen Decker, out of Doha, she's whitewashing the Taliban. In fact, she meets with representatives of Haqqani and Taliban all the time in Doha. And this is the same individual who says there shouldn't be a resistance against terrorists in Afghanistan and that she will not support any armed resistance against terrorism in Afghanistan. She's the same woman who was asked by one of the most famous journalists of Afghanistan, Sami Mahdi. He asked him on Amu TV, said, what about Sirajuddin Haqqani? Is the US still trying to kill him, arrest him, put him in jail? Is Sirajuddin Haqqani still a terrorist? She says, I cannot answer. Sami Mahdi asked her, well, you work at the State Department. The State Department is looking for him. There's a $10 million bounty issued by the State Department for information on his arrest that would lead to Sirajuddin Haqqani's arrest. She says, oh, this is very complicated. She refuses to call the man a wanted terrorist. So your question was, are there Taliban here and involved in the elections? I say they hold official offices and they're here. Just have a look at their statements and then you tell me if these people are not Taliban sympathizers or if they're not whitewashing the Taliban.
Man, that's scary. Is there anybody in our government? I mean, I know you're very well connected. Is there anybody within the federal government that is against this? That's trying to stop the funding? I think Congressman Tim Burchett has some type of a bill coming that's trying to stop funding the Taliban. Is that correct?
Correct.
Are you familiar?
So, Congressman Tim Burchett, great guy. He is at the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He already got a bill passed, introduced at House Foreign Affairs Committee, and it passed. It's supposed to go to the House floor. I don't know why it hasn't gone to the House floor. But are there individuals? Yes, that are against the Taliban, very loud. Congressman Mike Waltz, Colonel, former U.S. Army Special Forces deployed to Afghanistan. He's the most vocal supporter of the resistance of Commander Massoud, and he is very much against the Taliban, and he is very loud. Congressman Brian Mast, wounded veteran of the Afghan war, Dan Crenshaw. You have a lot of veterans. There are even veterans, it doesn't matter which party they belong to. Take, for example, from Colorado, James Crow. I hope I have his name correct, James Crow. He's a Democrat from Colorado in Congress. Now, when it comes to the Taliban, he's a veteran of the Afghan war. You can compare his statements with the statements of all the other Democrats, his colleagues. You'll just be shocked, man. So the Democratic Party right now is towing the party line. They're refusing to say that the Taliban is a terrorist group. But these veterans who are in the Democratic Party in Congress, I tell you, Sean, their conscience will not allow them to say that the Taliban is not a terrorist group, that the Taliban there's such a thing as a Taliban 2.0. Their conscience will not allow them. They have seen what the Taliban do to women, to children. They know what the Taliban did to their own battle buddies. Their conscience will now allow them to say everything that the rest of the Democratic Party is saying. So you have veterans of the Afghan war who are elected officials in Congress, and they're in support of the Commander Massoud and the National Resistance Front, and they're against the Taliban. One of those individuals, like I said, and that includes Congressman Tim Burchett, and there are many, many others. Chairman Michael McCall, the chairman of House Foreign Affairs Committee, he's a true gentleman. He cares about not only veterans, but he cares about what happened and how Afghanistan was abandoned. He has held several hearings on Afghanistan. Have you ever watched one of those hearings, Sean?
Bits and pieces.
So have a look at like the first 15 minutes of it, and you'll be shocked. So you have Chairman Michael McCall in the middle saying Taliban is a terrorist group. They have killed thousands of Americans. They gave safe haven to bin Laden. He's saying all the right things. And then he hands over the floor to his colleague, the ranking member of HVAC, a congressman from New York, Gregory Meeks. And now listen to his speech. He refuses to call the Taliban a terrorist group. He does not support us. I don't know if he supports us or not on a personal level. Publicly, he's towing the party line. He says the exact opposite of what Chairman McCall says. And he comes from the state of New York, the state that was attacked on 9/11. And he has already forgotten. Now, I say this, and I'm saying this not as a member of NRF. I'm saying this as an American veteran. Isn't there a single American veteran to challenge Gregory Meeks in New York? A single. Where are the anti-Taliban Democrats? Honestly, where are the anti-Taliban Democrats at this point? This is what I want to know. Other than these veterans that I named, who are Democrats, who, like I said, their conscience will not allow them, Sean, but where are the rest? Where are those who care about women's rights? They say they care about women's rights. Where are they? No women anywhere in the world are as oppressed as the women in Afghanistan right now. No women. The most insulted women are the Afghan women. The most oppressed women are the Afghan women. No one in the resistance is saying, Sean Ryan, suit up and come and help me defeat the Taliban. No one is saying this. No one is saying, you give me weapons or I will stop the resistance. All we're saying is stop supporting the Taliban. And if you say you're for women's rights, well then stand with women's rights. Stand against the Taliban. Forget about your party for a moment. Just forget about the party. There's something beyond the party. There's values, visions, things that make you who you are. We have reached a point, Sean, where I'll tell you honestly, I think people in America have forgotten who they are. They don't even know who they are. They don't know, they've forgotten what this country stands for, how this country, how this vision started. They've forgotten that. And if you don't know who you are, there's no way you can know who your enemy is. You don't even know who you are. So it's left up to, honestly, me at this point. To give you an example, I come from a bombed village in Panjshir, Afghanistan. I came here, this country, a very generous country, accepted me, gave me a home, gave me trust, gave me an education, allowed me to serve, gave me security clearance, gave me everything. Now I am the one reminding them, look, your founding fathers or your patriots, the guy whose statue you want to go and destroy and burn, George Washington, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, they're your heroes. You call them racist, slave owners. You have forgotten who you are. All this freedom that you have here, all the freedom veterans shed so much blood for to try to defend this. Why do veterans join? It's not for paycheck. Why do people volunteer and join the military? It's not for, because we get a lot, the paycheck, the money is too much. It's not that. It's for this idea, what makes America America. In order to keep this, we join, we sacrifice. But the people here, they actually have forgotten, like I said, who they are. They don't know who they are. They don't understand their own history. If they did, things would be very different today, man.
What does the NRF need from the U.S.?
right now,
Right now.
I'm gonna surprise you. Like I said, I'm not gonna say weapons. I'm not gonna say money. At the minimum, stop sending money to the Taliban. At the minimum. And you will see signs of Taliban crumbling in under a year. But if, as a veteran now, I will say this to you, as a veteran, you know unconventional warfare, you know what a resistance requires and needs. Sniper rifles, drones, surveillance equipment, medical kits, uniforms. Resistance needs all of these things. So we're not even there yet. We're saying at first, the first step, stop supporting the Taliban. But if you really want to go and support, well, then you want to just turn the tables, then these are the things that every resistance requires and needs. And keep in mind that what is happening in Afghanistan, it's not just for Afghanistan. The battles that are being fought there, the resistance that is fighting terrorism, this is an international terrorist group. It's not even about Afghanistan at this point. There's nothing else. What I mean by that is there's nothing else the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Haqqani could do to us at this point that they haven't done already. Our children are already in madrasas, brainwashed. They're going through this brainwashing school to become the future terrorists, suicide bombers. Our daughters cannot go to school. 20 million women in Afghanistan are not part of society. The Taliban brought in everything they could against the NRF, and they failed. They brought Pakistani air support. They brought Haqqani, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. They couldn't do anything. We're still alive, and we're still resisting. It's no longer about Afghanistan. At this point, it's about America. It's about what it means to be an American. It's about these guys are coming for you. What are you going to do? It's about who you are as an American. Keep this in mind. And I say this as a person who came from Afghanistan and this country took me in, and what I have seen in America. When lights go off in America, lights go off everywhere. It's no longer about us. It's about you.
Legend, I got one last question. I think we've pretty much covered just about everything. But my last question is, I think there is a very high probability that the U.S. is going to have to intervene within the Afghanistan borders again in the future. Our kids are going to be fighting there. How are the Afghan people going to receive the American people, the American military, when we go back in there after we've abandoned them?
The Afghan people, naturally, as any other people would be, they're pissed. They have been abandoned. Their hearts are broken. They see their family members die and get raped on a daily basis. But these people are very resilient. They're very generous and forgiving people. They have seen this before. All of these people have put their trust into this one man, Commander Massoud, and the National Resistance Front. Now that man will not refuse help if you offer help. So when America goes and America offers help, he will accept the help. But it doesn't even have to get there, Sean. You don't have to go back to Afghanistan. The whole point that you were in Afghanistan, all these veterans served in Afghanistan, was to create a force who, after we left, would keep terrorism at bay. And you succeeded. That force is now the National Resistance Front. There's a leader. There's operations against terrorism every day. You don't have to go back there. No one is asking for the US to come back. There is a force. You can solve this by supporting that resistance. Start with the political office of the NRF. Start anywhere. But we don't have to go there. Our kids don't have to go there. Our kids could stay here. Focus on everything else. Afghanistan it has the force it needs. It just needs our support, our voice.
Well, Legend, do you have any closing remarks that we missed?
I would like, yes, a few, if you'll let me. As a veteran, I know what all these other veterans are going through, the sacrifices they have made in Afghanistan. I know what the Gold Star families are going through. Honestly, I know what the Afghan people are going through. I know what the Americans are going through. And it's tough. It's tough. A lot of them ask if this was in vain, if it mattered. I tell you, it did matter. I go there. I still go there. I'll be going there very soon again, back to Afghanistan. And I tell you, it matters. It mattered. It mattered to the people there. It matters to the NRF. It mattered to the Afghan army. It mattered. So don't think that it was all in vain. Don't think that it is over and there's nothing else to be done here. It's not true. Afghanistan has not collapsed. It's not over. There's still things you can do right now. Give us your voice. Get behind the NRF. That was the whole objective, the mission, to have this force that we would go, we would sacrifice and train, and this force will save Afghanistan, which in turn would save America. And you succeeded. So all of those sacrifices that you made, Scott Mann made, Travis Peterson, all of these soldiers, it mattered. You succeeded. We're at a juncture where at this point you can either say, oh, it didn't matter and look the other way, and the Taliban will agree with you, it didn't matter. Or you could believe me, your fellow veteran, a member of the NRF, a person from Afghanistan, telling you that absolutely it mattered. And the people in Afghanistan are forever grateful for your sacrifices.
Well, thank you for saying that. Legend, I just want to say it's an honor to have you here, and man, I don't even know how to say this, but I'm just sorry for how things turned out over there.
I'm sorry too. We can change it though. We are changing it.
Sure we'll meet again. God bless you. Keep up the good work.
No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.